the more your own cash you have into a house, the more of a risk it becomes for foreclosure and more appealing to a bank. You get no points.
Yeah.
You don't get a lower payment. You don't get any payments for paying extra into your house. And it becomes more appealing to the bank to take it. Hello and welcome back to the Main Street Patriot Podcast. We are on episode 10. I am Jimmy Vreeland, the Main Street Patriot. Me and my team, we are out on Main Street fighting for you, the high-earning, highly successful person who still wants to be able to invest in single-family real estate before the hedge funds and Wall Street buy it all up. So with me, as always, is my producer, Jake.
What's
Jake,
up?
How you doing today?
Fantastic.
Nice. But first, listen to this. You hear that? So this podcast is actually, we're going to have a different sponsor this week. It's brought to us by Jocko Go.
Wow.
This really is the greatest energy drink ever. Let's make this a reel. Maybe Jocko will see this and I can get to be an affiliate. But look at it, folks. This is my 11 o'clock little bump every day.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a podcast on my caffeine consumption. But
Bringing you the
discipline equals
energy.
freedom. It's discipline in a can, Jake.
I love that.
It really is the greatest energy drink ever. Like no crash. Like I talk pretty fast on podcasts. I might really be talking fast on this one. Now that I got my 11 o'clock Jocko.
Try to keep up with us, listeners.
Yeah. But actually first, if you're looking for great tips on energy drinks and real estate and a few passive deals, check out our free Facebook group at the Main Street Patriot, Ranger Real Estate, how to get wealthy on Main Street. So, Jake, we're going to talk about a somewhat controversial topic. This is almost, I don't think it's as bad as religion and politics.
Okay.
But you know it, of taboo topics to avoid.
Right.
I think it's religion,
Right.
politics,
Yep.
diets, maybe workout plans,
Okay.
and then finally debt. Debt and leverage.
It's totally taboo.
Like, have you noticed how crazy people get about talking about their whatever diet they're on?
Yes. Yeah, very sensitive.
Yeah, it's like almost identifying. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's like, this is too much part of your identity here.
Yeah. And then it almost becomes like religious fights and whatnot. But
That's a different story, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Subject for a different podcast. Sorry, starting the podcast
Stop
off.
turning your body into your religion.
We might have to do that on the other podcast.
There you go.
So what we are going to talk about today is leverage and debt.
Nice.
And I come from a school, and I didn't learn this right away. It took me a while to get comfortable with this. But you cannot grow your wealth without being able to responsibly use other people's money. And be a good steward over your own assets and other people's assets.
Nice. So this is why you want to do this episode and why it's so important as one of the 4 pillars of wealth.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah, I want to give a couple frames. I want to kind of give a couple thoughts.
Okay.
But whenever I talk about leverage, I always have a picture of Archimedes. Archimedes was a Greek philosopher, and he said, give me a lever long enough, and I'll move the world. And so basically a lever is some tool that you have where you can have small inputs for greater outputs. So leverage in finance is small amount of your own cash for a great output.
Yeah.
That's how, when I think of why I'll go into debt to buy houses, that's what I think about. And then we'll combine this episode and the tax episode to say, hey, that's why you can't become wealthy without investing in assets that have tax advantages and you can use other people's money.
Sure.
So, in recent times, the guy who has kind of made the idea that debt is bad, I would say, is Dave Ramsey.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You a Dave Ramsey guy?
I've heard some of his stuff, but I have not gone to the show and rang the bell or whatever. And
Yeah.
That's always a fun moment for people, though, I'm sure.
And then, so the way mentally I got over the Dave Ramsey thing was, for personal finances, I think Dave Ramsey's great.
Yeah.
Like, never use debt to consume.
Right.
Like that, for me to be able to invest, I had to stop spending money crazy, and I had to get rid of all my credit card debt. So then all my extra cash could go to investing. And so when me and Susie got married, we had a year of crazy fun, crazy spending. I'm like, oh my God, we're in too much debt.
Yeah.
And then we spent a couple years getting out of that debt. And then after that debt was gone, we kept buying more houses.
Nice.
And so it's a lot of between Newtonian physics. It's kind of like the difference between Newtonian physics and Einstein. What is quantum physics, right?
Yeah.
Not all Newtonian rules apply
Right.
in quantum physics.
Right.
So for personal finance, not all the same rules apply to investing. Does that make sense?
Yep. Total.
And so the other thing is we talked
They're
about
all tools. You just got to decide which ones you're going to use when.
correct.
Yeah.
And when different rules apply or don't apply.
Yep.
And so we talked about this in a previous podcast, but the other thing is debt has been historically viewed as either leverage or evil.
Right.
Like I don't think the Islamic religion says you can't loan to another Muslim. Don't quote me on that. I believe that's true.
I've heard something like that. I also don't know if it's true.
Yeah.
But yeah.
In Deuteronomy, it says, does it say you can't loan? I don't remember. It says something
Let's
to
look
that.
at that. Let's go back.
There's different translations, but I believe Dennis Prager, I heard him say one of the translations is you can't lend to people who can't pay you back.
Right.
Like that's usury.
Yeah. Deuteronomy 28:24. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. He shall lend to you, and you shall not lend to him.
So not really clear there.
Here, Deuteronomy 23:19. Here's one translation. Do not charge interest on the loans you make to a fellow Israelite, whether you loan money or food or anything else. So it's pretty.
It's a little nebulous because does that mean, can you lend to non-Jews, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I heard Dennis Prager say was one translation, what it really means is you can't lend to people who can't afford to pay it back.
Right.
But in the Middle Ages, lending was completely off, couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like it was illegal.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably slowed down human flourishing.
Sure.
Because you need to be able to lend money to other people who have a higher time preference for the cash to put it into use.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're dealing with a lot of stuff here when we talk about leverage. That's somewhat controversial topic. So I teach people that you got to look at it. There's different levels of debt. And so you got to run the different levels of debt based off risk of ruin, recourse, and interest rate. So I'm going to kind of introduce these themes. You tell me if it's making sense.
Great.
So recourse, I'm going to explain a couple terms. What recourse means is what the lender can take from you if you default on the loan, right? Mm-hmm. And then one of my favorite quotes from Nassim Taleb, I would love to do a full episode on anti-fragile, skin in the game, fooled by randomness, and the black swan. But he always says if risk of ruin is present, return on investment is irrelevant. So what does that mean? You'll have a bunch of people. Do you remember when the GameStop thing went down? And people were making a ton of money on GameStop because of Reddit.
Right. Yeah. The meme stocks, as they called it.
Yeah. And so in the beginning, people made a ton of money and then people lost their shirt, right?
Right.
And it's because who cares what you're making if risk of ruin is present?
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you're being irresponsible. Like if you make money when risk of ruin is present, you just got lucky.
Yeah.
And you can't repeat it and you can't do it.
Right. It's a total gamble.
It's not really investing. It's gambling
right.
and speculating.
Right.
And so that's always in my mind. If risk of ruin is present, then whatever my return is who cares?
Yeah.
And so let me bag on traditional financial planning. The other thing, because they don't use leverage, is it's all your cash.
Uh-huh.
And your risk of ruin is all your cash. If you lose on a real estate deal, all you lose is your down payment.
Right.
Sure, maybe your credit rating gets banged up, but not really. Mm-hmm. And you're doing all this only for a 10% return. Mm-hmm. So we actually will do an episode on anti-fragile. That's in the works. And I kind of go through that there's risk of ruin present and you only get a marginal return.
Yeah.
So here is the worst level. And when I think about this, I think about the beginning of Rocky. Not a lot of people remember this, but Rocky was a strong man for a loan shark. So he was a leg breaker.
Yep.
And so, so the worst level of debt is borrowing from a loan shark. Your risk of ruin is physical injury and damage. But the good news is the reason you go to a loan shark, there's no risk to your credit report. Recourse is physical injury and damage. And then interest, high interest rate. So you see on those three levels, why going to a loan shark is just a horrible idea.
Yeah. You avoid it if possible.
And that's the problem. People call it all debt.
Yeah.
A 30-year fixed mortgage and borrowing from a loan shark is still debt in the Dave Ramsey world.
Right. Not quite the same thing.
And so remember last episode, we talked about second and third order thinking?
Yep.
You got to pull some things apart.
Yep.
That's what we're doing today.
Love it.
All right,
Love
so next is payday loans. Risk of ruin. Now, payday loans, if you mess up on a payday loan, there is a risk of ruin because there's a credit report.
Yeah.
They can hurt your credit report. Recourse, it is personal. They can take back whatever asset, that's why it's called a title loan, is they can take your car back. They can go after other assets. Now, probably not going to get your kneecaps broke. That's cool. So I'd put
Progress.
I put a little lower on the recourse thing. And then interest rate is high. And not only that, it's compounding.
Yeah.
So this goes back to the morality. I don't know where I shake out on these payday loans as far as the legality and morality of them. Because I do think they're lending to people who can't afford to pay them back.
They can?
Cannot.
Sure.
But there are some people who can. It's going to be tough, but they can do it.
Right.
And so I don't know, this one's a tough one because, payday loans do kind of get a bad rap.
Yeah.
And then politicians always want to get them started. But then the problem with that is, let's say they shut down payday loans. The cost of interest, it'll be impossible for people who want to borrow money in those situations to ever borrow money.
Yeah.
And so then here's a messed up libertarian view of it. So let's say you got all the capital available for loans.
Right.
And a tranche goes out to payday loans. And investors are willing to loan on payday loans because they get that high interest rate, even though it's higher risk.
Yep.
Let's say you take away payday loans, and then all that cash has to stay in the acceptable lending avenues. That's kind of a subsidy to people who don't need those loans. And interest rate, since there's more money trying to get out, they'll have to lower interest rates for other people.
Yeah.
It's kind of messed up, right?
Right. I mean, for some, it's like a liquidity, almost you could look at it as like a liquidity effort.
Yeah. So it's
There's
just
moments where cash is
They
king.
need it.
You need the cash. Yeah.
And so it's not as simple as the answer is they're mean, they're bad. Some politicians should shut that down.
Right.
It's like, oh, this is a hairy issue.
Right.
And then a libertarian would say that restriction on trade is a subsidy to wealthier people because now our interest rate will lower because of a supply and demand. So that was kind of a tangent. We'll go.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, back to your point of the really qualifier is are they able to pay it back reasonably expectation?
And then how does a blunt instrument like the government make that determination?
They can't.
Who knows? All right, so let's go up one level up from payday loan is consumer credit cards. Risk of ruin is high. They can damage your credit report and they can come after your personal assets. They can make sure you can never borrow money again.
Right.
So risk of ruin with consumer credit cards is very high. There is personal recourse. They can come after your asset, destroy your credit report, and the interest is high and compounding. So not a great option for borrowing. Now, I see a lot of this 0% interest business cards. Like you're a small business owner. Do you get these offers?
Oh, all the time.
What do? You take them or not?
I rip them up and I throw them in the trash.
Because I did do this. And I was like, I'll just refi the debt. And I couldn't do it after I borrowed a bunch of money on them. And it was easy. So I've seen people use them successfully, but they're very responsible and did a good job managing it. Like you have to manage this.
Yeah.
And so they're definitely better than consumer credit cards if you need the cash. And I needed it to start my business, so I did it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I love doing it.
Right.
And so I've also had people like, can't I just put down payments for a house on these credit cards? I was like, no, don't do that. because if you can't do the refi, the interest rates are nuts. So I prefer people actually find a better avenue to find that cash.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're getting into what I believe is wealth producing debt.
Okay.
And so commercial bank loans. So most of my, after I got past my 20 conventional loans, I had to go to these commercial bank loans. And I love them. Most of my portfolio is in these loans. But risk of ruin is lower. The bank can only take the house back. Personal recourse is the bank can come after personal assets after they take the house if there's still a balance. But, there's different ways with trust and different entity structures you can protect yourself. But that risk is out there. And then the interest rate is reasonable. It's prime or lower than prime. The reason it makes it a little bit riskier, there's our balloons. Do you know what a balloon is?
Yep.
So,
but for the listener.
Yeah, for the listener, you want to extend your amortization out as long as possible so you can let inflation take effect as long as possible, and you want the terms for as long as possible. Lenders want to lend the money out for as least amount of time, and for the least amount of time, and if they have to go long, they want to be able to readjust the interest rate. So that's what the balloon is. So every 3 to 5 years, the interest rate and the terms will adjust. So the reason it's safer than a credit card, but it's not as safe as a 30-year mortgage because you don't have that 30-year certainty.
Right.
And so, for example, like I had a couple of my balloons come up in 2023. So my interest rates went from like 5 to 7. Like that sucked.
Yeah.
But the houses had appreciated so much. I was like, cool, whatever. Okay. So now non-recourse commercial banks, it's possible from a commercial bank to get non-recourse. Now your risk of ruin's gone because all they can do is take the house. They can't come after any of your personal assets. But the interest rate to get that type of loan is generally slightly above market. So you're going to pay a higher interest rate, and your down payment is something like 40 to 50%.
Yep.
And like we talked about in the last episode, your goal is, or we talked about 2 episodes ago, your goal is to get as little of the amount of your cash into a deal for the maximum output, thus leverage. Now, here we go. The best of the best. This is
the moment you've all been waiting for.
Yes. This is the wealth producer. This is what I call middle class welfare checks. And it is the 30-year conventional mortgage. So risk of ruin, very low because there's a fixed rate of interest and there's no balloons. You have a 30-year certainty. That fixed rate, you can't put a price on that amount of certainty. So when you get a 30-year fixed mortgage, the only place your interest rate's going to go is down.
Yeah.
So if rates lower, then you refinance. And so now recourse, there is personal recourse, but it's at a fixed rate for 30 years. It's almost free money when you consider inflation.
Right.
Because, years 15 to 30, you're going to be paying the bank back with garbage dollars. And then the interest rate is the market interest rate. So you don't have a lot of risk of ruin risk. You don't have any interest rate risk, and you really don't have any recourse risk. And so the other thing I encourage everybody who works with us is buy a house, put $5,000 aside for whenever the tenant's gone, for the make ready, and then to cover yourself for the mortgage. Because people are like, what if I default? And I'm like, well, dude, you have a cash machine. Do you really think that's going to happen? Another reason we work with highly liquid, highly successful people.
Sure.
And then another reason, if you don't have a cash machine, you shouldn't be buying these assets.
Right.
So kind of back to episode 3. There's a great video on my YouTube. We could probably attach it to the show notes on this one. But Warren Buffett talking about the glory of a 30-year mortgage. And like how he wishes, like that's the other thing. You, as a new real estate investor, you can go to a bank and get a 30-year fixed mortgage for a house. Warren Buffett can't go to a bank for a 30-year mortgage for Berkshire Hathaway.
Sure.
What do you think is a better, higher credit risk? Warren Buffett or you?
You.
But the bank gives you money because the government's backing these loans.
Right.
Like it's very hard to express how powerful these loans are.
Yeah, that's cool. He's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah, and so a couple more principles. You want to extend your balloon as long as possible with the longest amortization because you want the longest terms possible, the most certainty, and you want to pay the least amount each month, and that's why you need a long amortization. So amortization means the length of the loan. That's why you want a 30-year mortgage.
Right.
And then here's something that people are always like, look at me like, what are you talking about? And it's like, hey, I want to pay my rentals off. And I don't believe you should do that. I think you either have your houses completely paid off or max levered. And so the reason is this is the internal rate of return of your house, of your investment, goes down if you pay off your mortgage early. So essentially when you pay principal down early, you're increasing your down payment.
Right.
So back to some algebra. You got a numerator and you got a denominator.
Yep.
To establish your rate of return as your numerator, it's whatever's been returned,
Right.
divided by how much money you have down. So when you pay off mortgages early, you lower your rate of return.
Right.
And you shorten your lever.
Yeah, and the $100,000 house example, you're going from maybe 25% ROI, pushing that closer and closer down to 5%.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to an opportunity cost. You could take that cash you were putting into a house and either put into another house or put it into a different type of investment vehicle.
Sure.
So it comes down to opportunity cost.
Yep.
The other thing is when, let's say you get to your 29th year inside a mortgage and you can't make that last mortgage payment. Does the bank say, hey, you've been so great over the last 360 months, we're going to let you off on this one?
Nope.
They take the house. And so the more cash you have, your own cash you have into a house, the more of a risk it becomes for foreclosure and more appealing to a bank.
Wow. They're not going to pay you out for...
No. And you get no points.
Yeah.
You don't get a lower payment. You don't get any payments for paying extra into your house.
Right.
And it becomes more appealing to the bank to take it. So if you only have 20% down into a house and the bank knows they have to take it back and all they get is your 20%, they're probably not going to take it back. So just another reason why not to pay off your houses early. And then there is the math where it does lower your rate of return.
Sure.
So that's why I always say never put cash into the walls of your house. The more principal, just a reminder, the more principal you pay down, it's more attractive to the bank. So the next, if you really want to scale a portfolio, the next level of debt is private or hard money loan. So risk of ruin on these is zero. And then this is when I raise private money, this is the way I sell it to investors. Hey, it's like, hey, you either get or you get. Essentially, the worst thing I could do for you is to pay you your interest. Because I get these houses at 50 cents on the dollar. You know, if I default on you, you get a $100,000 house for 50 grand.
Right.
And so that's why the private lending is so advantageous for both parties.
Right,
the investor is
right.
either going to get their interest or they're going to get a house. For me as a borrower, there's no risk of ruin. The only recourse is to take the house back, so they can't do anything to me personally. And then interest rates above market interest rate, I pay 8% right now, but still safe because the less chance of risk of ruin, the higher I would rate the deal.
That makes sense.
And then another thing that comes out, I think we've said this in a couple of other episodes, but if stocks and qualified plans are so safe, why won't a bank lend on them? That's why I've always had a max amount of certainty inside of real estate.
Right.
But now let's talk about the downside of leverage. It is a double-edged sword. Leverage cuts both ways. The way it amplifies returns, it can cut the other way. And I don't know if it can necessarily amplify your loss. No, it can't do that. But, there is risk when you take on debt. And I don't want to pretend there's not risk. There's risk anything you do in life.
Yep.
So the way I like to balance your risk is with cash reserves.
Sure.
Like I just said earlier, you got to be liquid to have these assets. You don't want to be looking on your couch for quarters to cover your down payment.
These are long-term assets.
Yeah. And so, keeping $5,000 aside where people are like, well, what's my return on that money? I'm like, I don't know. You can put a whole life policy. You get 4% tax free, which is equal to pretty much what you're going to get in the stock market. And so having reserves aside may lower your risk of your rate of return, but it lowers your risk of ruin. And if you're going to choose one, you always choose lower your risk of ruin. So that's why I love having cash aside. So that's what I got on leverage, Jake. The takeaway is a 30-year fixed mortgage. It's your American duty. This is coming from the Main Street Patriot. It is your American duty to get 20 of these. It's the only subsidy the government will ever give you as a middle-class American. Take advantage of it. We've done the math. We show you how it produces wealth. That's what I got on that.
I love that. You're a patriotic duty. There you go. Nice.
So that is a part of the appeal of the Ranger Real Estate Program is if you do want to start buying these assets, we hook you up with all the lenders. You don't have to search for them. We connect you with the best lenders. We get you going, whether it be 30-year fixed mortgage lenders, hard money lenders, any type of lender you need, we will get it so you can build up that portfolio. So if you're interested in working with my team and joining Ranger Real Estate, there's a link in the show notes. Click that link. Get on a call with our team. If you're enjoying these patriotic, these different ways to look at debt and real estate, please like, share, and subscribe. If you think anybody else would like these type of ideas, and then maybe Jocko's out there listening. I'd love to be an affiliate, Jocko. Great energy drink, great work on that. That's all I got, Jake. What else? What you got?
Hey, just join us next time for episode 11. And we're doing tax benefits,
I think we're going to do tax benefits.
Nice.
Yes. So, all right, guys. Talk to you later. So if you like what you heard today and you want to learn more, sign up for a discovery call with one of the Vreeland Capital success coaches at jimmyvreeland.com.